Pursuant to Standing Order 108-2, our briefing on the deployments of Canadian Armed Forces personnel in Iraq will begin. I just want to introduce our witnesses who are at the table. Starting on my left-hand side, I've got Peter Boehm, who's the Associate Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. Welcome, sir. Glad to have you here. Sitting next to him, we've got Ambassador Andrew Bennett, who's the Ambassador of Office for the Religious Freedom. Welcome, sir. Next to him, we've got Minister Baird, Minister of Foreign Affairs. We've got next to him Minister Nicholson, who is the Minister of Defense. And sitting next to him, we've got General Thomas Lawson, who is the Chief of Defense Staff. So what I'm going to do to get started is we're going to start with our opening statements. We're going to start with you, Mr. Nicholson, then we're going to move to Mr. Baird, and then finish up with Mr. Bennett. And then we'll go around the room over the next 2 hours to ask questions to fill in some of the blanks based on your testimony. So, Minister Nicholson, I'm going to turn the floor over to you now. The floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs.
Mr. Chair, honorable members, I want to thank you for the invitation to appear before your committee today.
Thank you all for taking time out of your schedules to be back in your riding in order to be here in Ottawa to discuss this very important issue. As everyone around the table unfortunately knows, the world has borne witness to unspeakable barbarism in northern Iraq in recent months. At the hands of an Islamist terrorist entity known as the Islamist State of Iraq and the Levant, also known as the ISIL. Stories have emerged of horrific beheadings. We have heard reports of mass graves and children being buried alive. We have also heard that Yazidi women are being kidnapped and sold into slavery by ISIL fighters. Those who refuse to convert to Islam are killed. So let us not mince words. This terrorist organization is not only committing barbaric murders through the systemic killing of religious minorities, but represents a real and growing threat to civilization itself. This is unacceptable to Canadians and to this government. It is incumbent upon all nations who believe in democracy, religious freedom, freedom of expression, and the rule of law to confront those who would threaten the innocent. Voilà pourquoi le gouvernement.
This is why our government has taken action. And I am happy to be here to provide your committee with details on the role our Canadian Armed Forces will play.
My colleague, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, will be addressing the committee on the current situation in Iraq and his first-hand experience on the ground. As you know, last Friday in Wales at the NATO summit, Prime Minister Stephen Harper made a statement regarding the Government of Canada's response to the situation in Iraq. Prime Minister Harper announced a deployment of several dozen members of the Canadian Armed Forces to Iraq, a deployment that will begin shortly upon final discussion with the government of Iraq. The Canadian Armed Forces members in question will provide strategic and tactical advice to Iraqi forces with the goal of increasing their effectiveness in operations against the extremist group. Let me be clear. These forces will be present in an advisory and assistance role, not a combat role. Mr. Chair, this deployment is in support of Iraqi security forces because any long-term solution to Iraq's stability is first and foremost an Iraqi responsibility. The initial deployment of our troops will be for a period of up to 30 days, and it will be reassessed after that time. I'm happy to say that although Canada's contributions are important, we are not alone in offering assistance to the government of Iraq. In fact, Canadian Armed Forces will work closely with their U.S. counterparts in this mission and will be joining our allies in providing critical advice to the forces in Iraq as they continue to repel the terrorist advance. Mr. Chair, I would also like to remind the committee that the Government of Canada has also previously taken steps to assist the people of Iraq. On August 15th, the Prime Minister announced that Canada would begin delivering critical military supplies to Iraqi security forces in order to assist them in their fight against ISIL. A CC-130J Hercules transport aircraft and one CC-177 Globemaster III strategic airlifter were committed to transport military supplies donated by our allies. Based in staging locations in the Mediterranean, approximately 75 Canadian Armed Forces personnel have been deployed for this work. This includes air crew, ground crew, and logistical support personnel. I can confirm that 11 flights by the Royal Canadian Air Force have taken place, delivering almost 500,000 pounds of military supplies from our allies. These supplies are enabling Iraqi security forces to halt the advance of ISIL while preventing further attacks against defenseless populations. More recently, my colleague, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, announced that Canada will contribute $15 million in non-lethal security assistance to support Iraqi security forces and to limit the movement of foreign fighters into Iraq and Syria. Again, Mr. Chairman, the Government of Canada is taking these steps because this terrorist organization has created a grave security and humanitarian crisis in Iraq. As I've said, this terrorist group is responsible for the deaths of thousands of innocent men, women, and children. It is clear that the further encroachment of ISIL threatens the territorial integrity of Iraq and poses a very real threat to regional and global security. There is real concern that this radical militant group is likely to harbor terrorists that may threaten Canada and our allies. Canadians are reading reports of these atrocities and they are concerned. And that is why, in coordination with our allies and the government of Iraq, Canada has taken these deliberate steps to help bolster the Iraqi security forces as they counter ISIL's militant activities and expansionist agenda. Mr. Chair, this deployment is a tangible example of our determination to contain this terrorist group while helping to mitigate the ongoing humanitarian crisis. While again, this is not a combat mission, this mission is not without risk. As always, and General Lawson will attest to this, our men and women in uniform are ready to answer the call. I think I speak for all of us around this table and all Canadians in thanking them for always being prepared to defend Canadian values and interests in this increasingly dangerous world. Encore une fois, mesdames et messieurs, les députés, je vous remercie.
Again, honorable members, thank you for taking the time to convene and to discuss this issue.
The ironess of the situation, we can come together and support these efforts to save lives and push back this threat to global security. Both myself and the Chief of Defense Staff, General Tom Lawson, will be available afterwards for questions. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Minister Nicholson. And I'll turn the floor over to Minister Baird for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I got back from Iraq just a few short days ago, where I was joined by two of our colleagues here today, Paul Dewar and Mark Garneau. We went to demonstrate Canada's solidarity with the people of Iraq in this incredibly challenging time, to see the situation for ourselves, to urge Iraqi leaders to come together in a united and pluralistic government, and to learn about what more needs to be done. I have to tell you, it was an emotional trip at times. It was just absolutely horrifying to see the literally hundreds of thousands of people who have been forced to flee their homes, and to listen to the stories about what they're fleeing from. I think I can speak not just for this government and this Parliament, but for this country when I say that we're determined that Canada will do its part in dealing with this crisis, both on a security and, just as importantly, on a humanitarian level. I'd like to take a few minutes to reflect on the rise of ISIL, the nature of the challenge that it has created, and some of the steps that need to be taken in tackling this challenge. After that, I'd of course be keen to take any questions or ideas and suggestions, comments that you may have. When confronted by the Arab Spring, now nearly a deep winter, Bashar al-Assad, an Alawite Shia, embarked upon a bloody campaign against his own people. Regional Sunni jihadists found their clarion call. Al-Qaeda in Iraq, the forebearer of ISIL, grew increasingly sophisticated as they effectively erased the border between Iraq and Syria. At the same time, Sunni tribes and leaders in Iraq grew increasingly disenchanted by the overly sectarian government in Baghdad. ISIL and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the self-proclaimed Salafist of the so-called Islamic State, filled that void. As we've all watched in shock at the speed of their advance and the brutality that they have employed. They have captured Mosul and other cities and taken over key infrastructure, including dams, oil fields, and military facilities. In doing so, they have executed hundreds of Iraqi troops. They have ruthlessly targeted anyone who they don't agree with. And there are growing reports of them using rape as a weapon of war, a horrible phenomenon that Canada has been working with the United Kingdom and others in campaigning against. The fact that we know about some of these actions is because they themselves document them to fan the flames of terror in the hearts of those they seek to rule. They don't hide their brutality. They, in fact, promote it. They film it, they tweet it, and they bask in the reaction that it causes. The despicable beheading of 2 international journalists in particular has raised the profile of the terrible threat that they pose. But let's not forget the thousands who have been victims of the same treatment. Those who happen to believe in God in a different way have tragically taken the brunt of their wrath. Our government has consistently spoken out on matters with respect to religious freedom, and I'm glad that Canada's Ambassador for Religious Freedom, Dr. Andrew Bennett, has joined us to brief us on that aspect. The reality is ISIL intends to eliminate the very notion of religious freedom through bloodshed and through fear. Repugnant reports continue to stream in of Christians, Yazidis, Turkoman Shiites, and others being ordered to convert to ISIL's barbaric interpretation of Islam or face death, and that includes women and children. I remember talking to a Christian family at an IDP camp last week. Their neighbors had informed on them to ISIL, and they had to escape for their lives within 5 minutes. This is one of just so many stories of the scale of human tragedy. Really, it's hard to comprehend, just as it is, frankly, hard to stomach. Nous affrontons aujourd'hui un des groupes.
What we are facing here is one of the most barbaric terrorist groups the world has ever seen. This is not somebody else's problem. This is a group that wants to impose its barbaric view everywhere, all the way from Spain to India. Their worldview is a direct challenge to the values of Western civilization, and it is a threat to international security and stability. It is obviously in all of our interests not to allow them to have a foothold from which they can launch attacks abroad. The battle against terrorism is one of the greatest struggles of our generation.
Barbaric terrorist groups the world has ever seen. It is sure not somebody else's problems. It is not a problem that will remain between the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. It's obviously in all of our interest to not allow them to have a foothold from which they can launch attacks abroad. The battle against terrorism, I believe, is the great struggle of our generation. We don't know how long the struggle will take or exactly how it will unfold, but there are actions that can be taken now to stem the flow of this threat, both by Iraqis and, just as importantly, by the international community. There are 3 key areas for action. We need to be firm and focused response from Iraqi authorities. We need to assist those who are on the front lines of this fight, and we need to continue to help those who are its victims. First, a strong and united government. Like the fingers of a hand coming together into a tight fist, the stability and security of Iraq depends on its government presenting a united front against terrorist threats. This was a key focus of our meetings with leaders in Baghdad last week. So I was very pleased to see yesterday that the Iraqi Parliament has approved a new government and cabinet under the leadership of a new Prime Minister. This unified leadership must put aside ethnic and religious divides and work together to meet the needs of all Iraqis, whatever their creed or color. As I made clear to the government last week, Canada is committed to work with them as they seek to do this. It is tremendously important that this government not just have an inclusive cabinet, but have an inclusive program that reaches out to Kurds and to Sunnis and other minorities. Minister Nicholson has covered what we're doing so far on the security front. The humanitarian challenge is just as daunting. The violence has displaced some 850,000 people over the last 2 months alone, and that adds up to a staggering 1.4 million since the beginning of just this year. In response to this, Canada is providing additional humanitarian support and will directly help to alleviate their hardship. Practical aid is being provided: food, hygiene kits, cooking materials, blankets, tents, medicine, and other important supplies. Much of our security and humanitarian assistance is focused on the Kurdish region, which we visited as part of our trip last week. Ambassador Sakamani has also been spending time there, and I'd like to pay special tribute to his hard work. ISIL has been testing the Peshmerga, while KRG leadership also worked to provide humanitarian relief. And our international allies have assessed that Kurdistan is where Canadian military help is needed. Canada stands with the Kurdish Peshmerga soldiers who are bravely fighting these terrorists and holding back their advance in the north. As I conclude, I ask that as we consider whether or how to act, we also consider what happens if we don't act. What happens if Canada does not do everything in its power to stop this barbarism? Will we be willing to look ourselves in the mirror in 10 years and ask if we have done enough? In a situation like this, there are no easy options, quick fixes, and win-wins. It might seem easy to ignore as we go about our comfortable lives here in Canada. It might seem convenient to brush options off as leading to mission creep in the future. But the hard reality is, inaction is not an option. La réalité est que l'inaction.
The reality is that inaction is not an option.
Unité
to show force and unity to fight against terrorism. And we need to show solidarity with the Iraqi people during this unimaginably difficult period.
We're hearing from Ambassador Bennett to deliver a few words.
Thank you, Minister Baird. We'll now turn the floor over to Ambassador Bennett for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairs, distinguished members of the committee. Je suis honoré d'avoir été.
I am honored to have been invited to speak on the dire and truly grave situation faced by Iraq and its people. And I thank the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development for convening this meeting.
And exponentially since June, the Iraqis have witnessed the newest and deadliest wave of hatred against religious communities in the world. By now, we are all familiar with the suffering and violence faced by millions of Iraqis at the hands of the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or ISIL. We have witnessed thousands of families forced from their homes and into refugee camps for standing in the way of ISIL's purported Islamic caliphate. We have heard of how hundreds of Yazidi women have now been abducted, converted to Islam, and married to ISIL militants against their will. And we have watched the massive expulsion of nearly 200,000 Iraqi Christians from places like Mosul and the surrounding area, places in which their churches have been a continuing presence for nearly 2,000 years. Ces images nous montrent une réalité que nous ne.
These images show us a reality that we cannot ignore. Since the creation of the Office of Religious Freedom in March 2013, I have monitored this trend of increasing social hostilities directed towards many different religious communities in Iraq and in the broader region. In all of my outreach to the various Iraqi and Syrian religious communities, including members of the Syriac and Chaldean Catholic churches, the Armenian Apostolic Church, the Assyrian Church of the East, and the Canadian Yazidi community, Every one of them shared the same anguish and the same fears about ISIL and its ideology that drives its followers to perpetrate acts of such inhumane barbarism.
And I, as well as Prime Minister Harper, have vehemently spoken out against the violence perpetrated by ISIL against Yazidis, Iraqi Christians from all the distinctive ecclesial traditions, Shiite Muslims, and others. I should also add that Sunni Muslims who do not agree with ISIL face acts of barbarism on a regular basis. On these occasions, Canada has repeatedly confirmed its leading role in protecting and advocating on behalf of all religious communities under threat, regardless of their faith, ethnicity, or country of origin. En tant qu'ambassadeur pour la liberté de religion,
As the ambassador for religious freedom, I have also made it a priority to raise awareness among Canadians on these atrocities that target our fellow human beings based on the faith that they profess. In seeking to raise awareness amongst our fellow Canadians, I have further emphasized how democracy cannot find fertile ground where freedom of religion, including the freedom to worship in peace and security, is not respected.
to advocate strongly with our allies in this cause, and with the support of my colleagues in the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, for greater championing of religious freedom in Iraq and in the region. For increased religious dialogue that is essential for pluralism to thrive in Iraq and the broader region, and for guaranteeing the safety and dignity of religious communities in Iraq. We hope to be aided in this effort by the newly created Contact Group on Religious Freedom, an initiative spearheaded by my office to develop among like-minded partners on the issue of religious freedom, common approaches and joint activities to promote and defend religious freedom around the world. In the past month, I have performed extensive outreach with Iraqi and Syrian religious communities, including members of the Chaldeo-Syriac and Assyrian churches, the Yazidi community, the Jewish community, including the World Jewish Congress, and Muslim communities, as well as many other churches and Christian denominations, to identify how best to help and support these gravely threatened communities. This has included a focused discussion with a number of faith-based aid organizations, such as the Catholic Near East Welfare Association and Aid to the Church in Need. Tomorrow, as part of discussions in Toronto with the Ismaili Imamat and the Aga Khan Development Network, I will seek their perspective on how Muslims might be more directly engaged in taking action, in whatever way, to defend the religious freedom of religious minorities in the Middle East. The Office of Religious Freedom, through its Religious Freedom Fund, is currently assessing a number of projects in Iraq to increase interfaith dialogue and lay the foundation for a safe and respectful environment for religious minorities in Iraq. Le Bureau continuera également à travailler à identifier en étroite.
The office will continue to work closely with partner organizations in the next 2 to 3 months to identify initiatives to improve, in the medium and long term, interfaith relations and dialogue in Iraq, and further contribute to the development of a country where every individual will have the opportunities and resources necessary to continue to practice their faith freely and without fear.
Programming is an integral component of Canada's broader long-term strategy to address the situation in Iraq and assist the victims of ISIL. It will be designed to complement Canada's assistance effort in Iraq, including humanitarian aid, and will contribute to the development of a stable Iraq where religious freedom is fully endorsed, as only a unified, pluralistic, and representative government can overcome the current crisis. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I very much look forward to the committee's questions.
And thank you, Ambassador. We are going to start, as we normally do, as our custom. The first round will be 7 minutes for all parties. We're going to start with Mr. Harris, followed by Mr. Bazan, and then Mr. Garneau, and then we're going to move into 5-minute rounds as we move forward through the rest of the question. So I'm going to start with Mr. Harris, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation this morning. We are all, of course, all Canadians are extremely concerned about the extreme violations of international humanitarian law, crimes against humanity and war crimes that have been committed. We're also obviously very concerned about the hundreds and thousands, as Mr. Baird mentioned, of displaced persons within Iraq who have left with, in many cases, nothing but the clothes on their back, and my colleagues will deal with some of that. But I want to deal with the military aspect of it and the response announced by the Prime Minister. We do need some clarity here because there's been numbers like a few dozen, and although you mentioned again today, but we've also heard 100, which is a little more than that. You talked about 75 Canadian forces being involved in the airlift, but the announcement on August 15th was about 30. So we'd like to have a little bit of clarity. So I have four simple questions. First of all, Mr. Nicholson, how many Canadian Forces troops are being deployed to Iraq? Are they special operations forces? Where specifically will they be? And what's the language capability? What language capability does the Canadian Armed Forces have to operate in the role you mentioned, advisory role amongst the Kurds in Iraq, which is where I understand we'll be helping. So those four questions. First, if you could keep it short, it would be great, because I have a few other questions as well.
All righty. Again, at this point in time, it's several dozen will be deployed to that area, Mr. Harris. They will be special operation forces. I can indicate that to you. They will be located in northern Iraq, and it's my understanding that we will be using translation services in cooperation with our allies.
The second question, perhaps General Lawson can better answer this question. Do we have a status of forces agreement with the Iraqi government? I know there's a question of getting the consent of the Iraqi government. We think we should also get the consent of the Canadian Parliament, but a status of forces agreement should be very important. When will we be likely to have one of those? And then secondly, General Lawson, could you indicate and describe the chain of command for our troops that will be proposed to go to Iraq between you and our troops on the ground?
Just answer that first, General. The Chief of Defense Staff will be in charge of Canadian forces in Iraq, and we will work in cooperation and in collaboration with our allies, but the Chief of Defense Staff will have the control and ultimate responsibility for Canadian forces. That being said, we have several Canadians on the ground now, and they have been welcomed by the Iraqi government, and again, we will be working with the new government for their cooperation. Is there anything you want to add,
I think my
General?
question was a bit more specific in that regarding a status of forces agreement. I don't think General Lawson will be on the ground there, so the chain of command is also of interest.
Again, they come under the responsibility of the Canadian Armed Forces, and ultimately that does reside with General Lawson. But again, we'll, as we have on a number of these occasions, we'll work in collaboration with our allies, but the forces on the ground will be under Canadian direction and control.
The only thing I would add to that, Mr. Chairman, is that the articles normally covered in a SOFA, as you've mentioned, will be provided to us through a Diplo note that our partners at Foreign Affairs are helping us with at this time.
If I could just briefly add.
Any notion of timing, Mr.
I'll just be very quick. The new government, Prime Minister al-Malki has not led an inclusive government, and it has been problematic in the Sintian period. With the formation and Parliament approving the new government last night, that should follow in short order.
When are we talking in terms of actual deployment?
Again, for national security reasons, we don't pinpoint these things, but again, our appearance before today and the briefings that we have given you and the announcements that we've made have indicated that Canadian forces will be deployed, but we don't give the exact time and place for obvious security reasons.
Are we talking a week? Are we talking a month?
Again, we're moving as quickly as possible, and as I indicated to you, there are already on the ground members of the Canadian lead in this area.
You still haven't answered the question of how many, of course, was pretty obvious, but we are proposing a 30-day mission I don't know what is expected to be accomplished within 30 days, but perhaps you could tell us that. And when the Prime Minister announced this in Wales in his speech, he said that the contribution of Canada was based on an assessment by the United States as to how Canada could best contribute. A review or reassessment in 30 days, is that going to be based on what the Americans think in 30 days, or do we have any specific criteria by which a judgment might be made whether Canada would continue in the role that's being proposed or some other role, or as sometimes it's called, I don't necessarily like the term, but mission creep has been a way of describing what might come next?
Well, as my colleague, I think, just said in comments yesterday, if we have to deploy and assist people where we can, and again, it's not a question of mission creep. Otherwise, we wouldn't be there to help anybody if that was always hanging over our head. But that being said, we've said we're going to analyze this on an ongoing basis, and I think it's quite reasonable to say that after we're on the ground and we are moving to assist, that to have this reviewed in 30 days I think is entirely appropriate, and I'm hoping that you'll agree with that you'd want us to have an ongoing analysis of how this is working.
If I could, we have two short-term goals. One is obviously to stop the advance of ISIL so we can contain the growing humanitarian catastrophe. Two, to provide support to the KRG and Iraqi officials and forces to turn back the advance, to help them help themselves. This thing is moving very quickly. The advance was very quick. On the positive side, the airdrops to support the Yazidi and religious minorities on the mountaintop went demonstrably faster than anyone could have imagined. So this thing is moving very quickly, and the Prime Minister has obviously said he will review it after 30 days, which I think is intelligent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baird and Mr. Harris. We're now going to move over to Mr. Bazan for the 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank both Ministers Baird and Nicholson and General Lawson, Ambassador Bennett, and Mr. Bowen for being here with us today to help shed some light on exactly what's happening in Iraq with ISIL, and of course what role the Canadian Armed Forces are going to be playing. I think all of us are very disturbed and disgusted and revolted by the violence that we've witnessed. I know that we over and over again want to express our condolences to all the families that have been victimized and terrorized by ISIL. In follow-up to some of the questions that Mr. Harris asked, I think it's important from the standpoint of this whole conversation about mission creep. We're talking 30-day deployment. How are we going to, at the end of 30 days, determine success, define the mission mandate, as we've already laid out, Minister, some of the objectives, but how do we actually measure that and know whether or not we've achieved those objectives?
Again, as Minister Baird just indicated in answer to the previous question, we're going to assess what's actually happening on the ground. And again, we will do this in cooperation with our allies, and we'll want to see if we're making a difference. And again, this is a very tragic situation. And again, we believe that we have to do our part to assist in averting any more tragedy of this type. So again, I think it's reasonable after a relatively short period of time to analyze exactly what's happening on the ground, what we're doing, and again, I think that's entirely appropriate.
So from the standpoint of the forces that we're putting on the ground, all in leadership positions, you talk about being there to assist and advise, not in a combat role. Can we just tell Canadians how prepared the Canadian Armed Forces are to carry out this type of mission, what their experience and expertise is, and exactly what they're doing in collaboration with our Iraqi security forces? Well,
as you know, Mr. Bazan, nobody has a better record in this world of getting the job done and stepping up to the plate when called upon than the members of our Canadian Armed Forces. And I indicated these will be our special operation forces that we will be deploying in northern Iraq, and again, they will become well-equipped, well-trained to deal with the situation situation on the ground. But as you pointed out again, and as we indicated in our opening comments, we are there for advising and for technical assistance. We are well placed to do that, and again, we'll do that in collaboration with our allies.
The goals and objectives that we've laid out specifically for the Canadian Armed Forces, how does that coincide with the other coalition partners that we're working with? I know that we are in charge of our forces on the ground, but what is the overall objectives of the coalition, and exactly what is the overall impact we believe this is going to have on the current situation as well as regional security?
Listen, obviously President Obama will be speaking to this in terms of the like-mindeds and coalition that is emerging. Obviously, the United States is providing a substantial amount of assistance. The United Kingdom is providing humanitarian aid, is transporting arms and munition from European partners to the Kurds. They've deployed 6 Tornadoes to the theater and 4 Chinooks. France is providing humanitarian assistance and is willing to join the United States in airstrikes. They are shipping weapons to KRG authorities. Germany is providing humanitarian assistance like Canada. It's announced that it would send arms to assist the KRG, and it's committed to provide other non-lethal military assistance, and it deployed a small number of military officials to oversee delivery. I could go on Australia, the Netherlands, Italy, Denmark, the Czech Republic, Croatia, Albania, the EU, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Norway, Sweden, and Japan.
Thank you. I know one of the concerns that we've heard from Canadians is the risk factor, and the Prime Minister even alluded to it, that no mission comes without risk. So how are we going to mitigate that risk and the exposure to our forces? And secondly, if something does happen, how do we deal with a medical emergency?
Again, and you quite correctly pointed out, as has been pointed out by the Prime Minister, that there are no missions that do not come without risk. I mean, we will take every opportunity to minimize that risk, at the same time getting the job done that we are deploying these members for. And my understanding is this is in complete cooperation, with our allies in terms of any types of medical assistance, anything of that particular type. But that being said, these missions are carried out with considerable caution and care and deliberate planning, and again, they don't come without risk. But that being said, this is not a combat mission. This is for giving advice and technical assistance, and we'll proceed on that basis.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I think I'll follow up with this question is, this issue of mission creep, do we foresee, if things continue to escalate in Iraq with ISIL, that there could be further military involvement?
Again, we have indicated, and the Prime Minister has indicated, that we are not putting boots on the ground. And this is the role that we have designated for Canadian Armed Forces, and that's what we are going to continue. And again, I think appropriately, for caution's sake, we will analyze exactly what has happened after approximately 30 days.
Since this announcement was made by Prime Minister Harper at the NATO summit in Wales, is this a NATO mission?
It's not strictly a NATO mission. Certainly, as you heard from the long list of countries that are cooperating with this, that many of them are NATO partners, some of them are not. And so this is an initiative by the Canadian government in cooperation with a number of allies, but it is not in of itself a NATO mission.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brazan and Minister Nicholson. We will now complete the first round with the Liberal Party and Mr. Garneau. 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for your remarks this morning. At the outset, I'd like to make it clear where my party stands on Iraq and ISIS. Yes, we believe, definitely, that we should provide more humanitarian aid for roughly the over 1 million Iraqis that have been displaced because of ISIS and who fled into refugee camps in northern Iraq. There's no question that northern Iraq is overwhelmed with these refugees. Having said that, if we don't want these refugee camps to become permanent fixtures on the landscape, then ISIS has to be dislodged and eventually defeated. ISIS is indeed a threat to world security, and Canada can't just say it's not our problem, because it is our problem. For that reason, my party supports the limited military role recently proposed by the government of sending in a group of advisors in a non-combat advisory role for a set period of time. Having said that, we would like to have more detail and more clarity. You have stated that Canadian soldiers will provide tactical advice to the Kurdish Peshmerga. My first question is, can you confirm that no Canadian soldiers will be in the trenches, on the front lines, or taking part on the ground in any offensive or defensive operations?
Again, I've indicated they are not taking a combat role, and that their role will strictly be advice and technical assistance. So again, I think I've been very clear on that, Mr. Garneau. And again, we're not putting boots on the ground. We're not engaging in combat activity. And again, our role is very specific and very clear.
Thank you. Now, sometime close to about the 30th day after arriving, the government's going to reevaluate the Canadian role and decide on one of the following things. Either the job is done and we're leaving, we're going to extend our involvement in the same role, or we're going to extend our involvement but change the role. I'd like to ask a fairly direct question here, and I would appreciate a yes or a no. If any changes are planned to the Canadian military role being discussed today, will the government undertake to bring them to Parliament?
Again, the government has reached out, as you know, to members of the opposition to keep them informed about this engagement and indeed all our activities in that area. And I believe that we will continue to inform and let other people know, including the opposition, as to what it is we're doing.
I think, Mr. Garneau, we're very committed to continue to have an open dialogue with parliamentarians in all parties, to communicate what we're doing. We've offered briefings, and we will continue to do that. At this time, the mission is what it is. Should it evolve? Should it be extended? Obviously, we'll remain in close contact. I think we've shown good faith, not just bringing the critics to Iraq, having this offering and volunteering to have this committee sit early before Parliament resumes. Parliament's back on Monday. There's obviously an opportunity on a daily basis to debate, discuss these issues. Other opportunities, opposition days, take note debates. But we certainly are committed to continue to engage with the opposition so that it's very clear what we're doing and what we're not doing. Obviously, we don't. This is explicitly not a combat mission, but undoubtedly we will continue to do more on the humanitarian front and the security front, and we certainly are committed to working constructively with all members of Parliament, including the opposition.
Thank you, ministers. I'll take that as a yes. Vous avez dit que nos soldats se rapporteraient.
You said that our soldiers would report to the leader of the armed forces. Can you explain how the soldiers will work with the Iraqi and Kurdish chain of command, and particularly with the coalition and with the American forces?
General Lawson may have comments on this, but again, as I indicated into an earlier question, the Canadian forces will remain under Canadian command. And as we have whenever we're involved with these types of activities, we work in close collaboration with our allies. And again, we are there to assist the people who are on the ground in their efforts to fight this terrorist group. And again, we will do that on a regular basis. I don't know if you have anything to comment.
The only thing I would add, Mr. Chairman, is that the lead elements have been warmly received by Iraqi forces, by the Iraqi government, and would be working in close cooperation and collaboration with Americans who have quite a background of activity in Iraq.
Ma question suivante concerne le 30.
My next question has to do with this 30-day period. This is a very complex situation. Why did you choose 30 days? obviously it takes time to set things up, and it seems to me that 30 days is a very short initial period for an operation which is so complex and so multinational.
Quickly in that part of the world, as you know, Mr. Garneau, and again, this is an ongoing crisis that changes very quickly, as you know, and so I think it's entirely appropriate that we on a regular basis analyze exactly what it is we are doing, how we're doing on the ground, and so I appreciate the Prime Minister indicating that after 30 days we will assess as to what it is we are doing, because again, we know how quickly things change in that part of the world, and this is an important mission for our Canadian Armed Forces, our Special Operation Forces, and so yes, we will watch this very carefully on a timely basis, and we will assess it after 30 days.
And we would certainly welcome any contributions you have to that assessment, whether it be on the security side, the defense side, the development side.
Thank you. My final question is, what makes our troops especially well suited to this kind of operation? I suspect, perhaps I'm not an Army officer, but I suspect our experience in Afghanistan, similar terrain, allows us to provide that kind of expertise. Is that the assessment?
You know, whenever we've called upon, as I indicated earlier, we always step up to the plate and get the job done, regardless when, where, or how. But I think you raised a very good point. There is quite a bit of knowledge of technical matters and issues related to that part of the world that were gained in the conflict in Afghanistan, and we believe this will be very helpful to in Iraq.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Garneau. We're now going to start our second round, which will be 5 minutes back and forth, and we're going to start with the Conservatives and Ms. Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to each of you for being here this morning. This is a very serious discussion that Canadians need to hear. Minister Baird, I'd like to address my questions to you regarding the humanitarian situation that you saw while you were in Iraq last week. Each of you has referenced the enormous humanitarian crisis that is developing, and you talked about each of you talked about the victims that you have seen. And Canada has been engaged over the long haul on this. In fact, since the beginning of 2014, we have spent more than $28 million on development assistance, humanitarian assistance in Iraq. We have since 2009 resettled more than 18,000 refugees from Iraq, and we've committed to another 5,000 coming out of Turkey. Most of them are Iraqis. So we have been engaged in this situation for a long time. But I wonder, Mr. Baird, Minister, if you could talk a little bit about how important it is that Canada participate, and what did you observe while you were there of the humanitarian assistance that we are providing?
I know, I'm sure Mr. Garneau and Mr. Dewar will speak to this as well. Obviously, our first priority is to stop this crisis from growing and getting worse, and that means containing ISIS from expanding. We obviously have provided very substantial support already. The issue of supporting refugees has been important. Minister Kenny and now Minister Alexander have done a lot of work on that. We've done a lot, and we'll do more. We announced $15 million in security assistance and $7 million in further humanitarian aid while we were there. I think I look at Mr. Dewar and Mr. Garneau. That's clearly positive. We'll have a very positive contribution, but more will be needed. There's no doubt about that. I think we've got to do two things. One is help ensure that we support the agencies on the ground. My views on some aspects of the United Nations not living up to their original high purpose. I have been very complimentary of the work that Valerie Amos's humanitarian group does, that the World Food Program does, with Earth for Cousins. We saw firsthand the good work that the UN is doing on the ground. They need more help. They need more support. So that is obviously a message that I'm going to be bringing back to the government. There are many families who don't want to leave Iraq. They obviously are horrified at the prospect of returning to Mosul. I mean, if your neighbor ratted you out for being a Christian to an international terrorist organization, it's hard to perceive how you'd ever feel comfortable returning to that. Some may want to come to Canada or leave Iraq. Others would be very keen to be resettled within the Kurdistan Regional Government's territory. So that's something as well we learned, and we'll look at what other measures we can do. Canada has faced, notwithstanding our generosity, in trying to support religious minorities fleeing persecution and death. We have faced some criticism of supporting the de-Christianization of the Middle East and particularly Iraq. Obviously, we want to support a pluralistic Iraq. I mean, pluralism is one of the great things we've established in this country. If that's not possible in all parts of Iraq in the short term, it certainly is very possible in the KRG territory. So that'll be something we look at. We are obviously concerned on a number of areas. I know Mr. Doer and Mr. Garneau have ideas that they'd like to share that they learned as well, and we're certainly prepared to listen to them.
You spoke a little bit about what Canada is providing: medical supplies, tents, blankets, going through agencies like the International Committee of the Red Cross, Save the Children, Mercy Corps, all organizations that have long roots, they have deep roots working in Iraq. Were you able to speak with any of those partners while you were there?
Sure, we spoke to a number, not just those, but others as well. There was a Canadian who was in charge of one UN operation we had the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with. They're doing a lot of good work, but more needs to be done. And I think that's got to be part of the development side, has got to be part of the equation. It's not a choice between security and defense or development. We can do all three. Clearly, going forward, we'll need to do more, particularly as we see the winter approaching.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're now going to move over to Mr. Doer, the NDP. Please have 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you to our guests. And I just want to start with Minister Baird. I saw what you saw, heard what you heard, and I think it's very clear that the priority for our government is to help those who are suffering, those who had to flee, as you mentioned. And we talked to those families. We saw on the front lines what was happening. And to that end, I just want to formally put forward a couple of asks that I would like to get the government to consider. Obviously, you've already touched on it. There has to be an immediate support for the setup of refugee camps. The refugees we didn't see were in Dahuk, where they do not have any shelter at all. And as we noted, it was 46 degrees. Winter will soon be coming, so that clearly has to be something we support. Just on 2 days ago, the UN had an appeal for $315 million, so clearly there's an ask there, and there's an absolute need, critical need to build those refugee camps, well, frankly, yesterday. Support the protection of minorities. If I may, this isn't the first time we've seen the assault on minorities. This is the third wave. I was there in 2007. 2006, there had been the targeting of Christians, Yazidis, a group that most people won't know, the Mandians, who are John the Baptist followers, etc. Then there was the follow-up to that just after I was there in 2009. There was another wave. We now have, 20 years ago, there was 1.3 million Christians. There's 700,000 in 2009. I have no idea what the numbers are now. So protection for minorities, and what we heard was they don't want to leave the country, many of them. In the case of the Yazidis, they can't, because their belief is that they have to be in this particular region. That's part of their beliefs. In the case of the Christians, they want to stay in the country, but they can't go back to Mosul for reasons you mentioned. So protection for minorities, be it housing or new communities being built, supporting that. Supporting the victims of sexual violence, this is something that we have to do. I'm just assuming we are going to do it, both the prosecution of perpetrators and support for the victims. And investigate and prosecute the alleged war crimes. So I'm putting that on the table and public about it. Minister Baird, one of the questions I have is, it does relate to the defense piece. When we were on the ground, and I appreciate the invitation from the government, I really do, it was important. We had no indication that we would be being asked to send troops. And I just want to, for the record, hear from you. Were you aware of that ask when we were on the ground? Not after there was an announcement, but was that something you were aware of? Because I say that all of the meetings we had with the President of Iraq, the President Barzani of the Kurdish Republic regional government, sorry, they didn't ask, be careful, they didn't ask for boots on the ground. And so I'm just wanting to know for the record, were you aware of the ask, and will you agree with me, we weren't asked by people on the ground in the meetings we had to send troops?
I'll answer the second part of your question first. Obviously, I think the people that we met with, they want to win this battle themselves, but they need support. They did talk about the need for arms, ammunition, and the like. They're not asking for someone to come in and fight their battle for them. So our answer is yes. We provided $50 million of assistance for non-lethal military and security support. Right. And two, that in conversations with the American government, with President Obama, this idea had come up. And obviously when the Prime Minister and other leaders met on the margins of NATO, further decisions to proceed were made. I knew that this was something that was in the cards.
Okay, so it was just what we heard in the media.
It was being considered.
It was in the media we heard it was something that was discussion between the President and Prime Minister.
Yes.
And that was it.
Yeah. If I could, but I did want to come back.
Sorry.
I did want to come back to your first point, because I think it's, you've mentioned 4 areas, and my answer on all 4 is yes, 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 and yes. I think that there is no doubt that the UN's appeal is an important one. There is clearly the need. I think they need 13 more camps of the size of the second camp that we visited. The appeal has gone out. We've received it. Obviously, notwithstanding that we have one department, we have a full Minister of International Cooperation, and I'll be speaking with him and my colleagues at our department to look at what else we can do. I don't think this is going to. We should certainly be very clear. The humanitarian mission will not be going for just 30 days. It clearly will have to be something that will be more long-term. The protection of minorities and resettlement is something that we learned, and we can look into what support we can do for that. I wholeheartedly agree with your comments on the victims of sexual violence. This has been something that Canada has been active on going back a number of years. You know, your intervention with respect to Libya was an important one. We put money into the G8 appeal that under the United Kingdom's leadership, and I led a delegation to an international conference supporting this issue earlier this summer. So that is important, not just with respect to rape as a weapon of war, but the comments Mr. Garneau made about the Yazidi women being forced to, and Christian women being forced to convert and forced to marriage, which is tantamount to rape in and of itself and certainly constitutes sexual violence. And I'll have my officials look at what can be done with respect to war crimes and the ICC. I think those are 4 good points.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Doer and Minister. We're now going to complete the second round. We're going to turn over to Mr. Goldring for 5 minutes.
Chairman, and thank you for appearing here today, gentlemen. It's to help us understand better, and I think it's worth mentioning that that Canada's contribution on this is to be greatly respected and admired, and I think that it's nothing new since Confederation Canada has fielded some 2 million men and women in uniform, and at a cost worldwide of some 115,000 who never came home. So Canada's contribution throughout all these years has been tremendous and tremendously respected. Ambassador Bennett, if I could ask you on this, it seems that we've just gone through one long series of combating terrorism, and then another group seems to be coming forward that it is even more barbaric than the one from the past that we've kind of worked with to fight over the past 10 years. And it seems to be coming under the name of Islam. And with your work in the various religions and organizations, is there any centralized area that you have had communication with the Islamic communities? That is there a central area there? Do they roundly condemn this organization? What nations in the region are seemingly supportive of it, and which ones do we have hope that we can have some influence from them possibly at some time in the future to counteract some of this type of outrageous, barbaric nature in the name of their religion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's a very important issue that you raise, Mr. Goldring. I think we need to be very clear that Islam does not condone terrorism.
Yeah.
And what we see in ISIL is a gross warping, distortion, twisting of a perceived understanding of Islam. It is not Islam. I think that's been very clear, and I think the majority of countries in the region have stated that. Certainly the Saudis have condemned ISIL. The Mufti, the Grand Mufti, a number of weeks back, speaking from Riyadh, condemned the activities of ISIL, saying that it was not Islamic. We've had tremendous support from the Jordanians, who have been very active in the area of religious freedom. They've categorically condemned ISIL. So I think there's a recognition that ISIL does not simply target, although the majority of people that they're targeting are religious minorities, such as Christians, Yazidis, Mandeans, and Shia Muslims. They will not stop there. They go after Sunnis that disagree with them. And I think that the countries in the region realize that if this is not stopped, if this violence that they are perpetrating is not halted, they will not stop simply at the borders of Syria and Iraq, that they will go after Sunnis that reject their distorted and warped understanding of Islam. To the point of a central authority, I think it's important to note that with the exception of some strains of Islam, such as Shia Ismaili Muslims, there is no sort of central leadership. In Sunni Islam, it's a fairly diffuse system of leadership through imams and senior imams, grand muftis in different states. So I have not had any contact with a particular central authority, since there really is not, as we might understand it in the context of Christianity, with bishops or patriarchs and so forth. However, I have reached out to a number of different Islamic communities represented here in Canada. I had a wonderful meeting just this past Friday with Imam Hamid Slimi, a Sunni Muslim leader in Toronto. I've engaged Shia Muslim leaders both in Toronto and in Montreal, all of whom have roundly condemned ISIL's action and have condemned not simply ISIL's sort of approach and their distortion of Islam, but they've condemned explicitly their persecution of Christians. They've condemned explicitly their persecution of Yazidis. So I have full confidence in the outreach that I've done to the Islamic community here in Canada, that they are very aware of the grave threat that ISIL poses.
What is their major...
Could I? Sorry. I had a conversation with one member of the Saudi royal family, who I think better, instead of saying that they're Islamic fighters, I think ISIS is more like a cult than it is a religious group. I was also very pleased, not just with respect to Islam, but the Arab League spoke out very strongly and unanimously in recent days, and we have seen substantial humanitarian assistance from the Saudis and other support from Jordan and the United Arab Emirates, which is important.
And what is their major power base?
Mr. Goldring, that's all the time we have. Sort of cut you off there. We're going to continue on here and start our next round. Still 5 minutes around with Ms. Gallant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my question is for the Minister of National Defence. Why is it that Canada is one of the first countries to participate in this?
Well, I mean, it goes back a little bit to the record that your colleague, Mr. Goldring, said that when people find themselves oppressed, attacked, when their freedom is threatened, when people are being murdered, Canada has a record second to none to stepping up and assisting people who find themselves in that situation. And so if you go back over Canadian history, you'll find that we were never in the business of conquering other lands or taking lands from people or oppressing people. We always stepped in to assist the people whose freedom was being threatened. And so our role here is perfectly consistent with that. As you know, we had a long engagement as you know, in Afghanistan, and again, that was perfectly consistent with that, there to assist the people of Afghanistan. And one of the things I think that we all as Canadians can take pride in is that when we go on these missions, we make a difference. And you know, where we have been, people are grateful to what we've done. I heard this myself when I was in the Middle East last summer from different individuals from different countries, that they seem to be very appreciative of the role that Canada played. And so I say to Canadians that yes, when you're in Europe, you're in the Netherlands, places, they all tell you how appreciative they are of Canadians, but it's not limited to what we did in Europe, and certainly Afghanistan is a good example, and certainly this is the latest in the Canadian story of assisting people who are in a desperate situation, a very desperate situation, and so it's perfectly consistent with the role that we've always played.
And what are the rules of engagement for our forces on this mission?
Again, it's, as I indicated in my opening remarks, we're there to provide advice and technical assistance. These are not boots on the ground. This is not a combat mission. We are there to give advice to the Iraqis, and again, working in collaboration with our allies. I mentioned the Americans, the British, others are there, and again, consistent with what we do. When we're called upon, we work with others as well. So in combination with others, and we are there to assist and provide technical assistance. So.
Okay, and could you describe the command relationship between our forces and the United States, as well as how operations will be approved and directed? Well,
not too surprisingly, the operational relationship between ourselves and the United States is very good, as happens whenever we get involved, or whether it's in a mission like this, or indeed, you know, on a formal arrangement such as NORAD. You know, we work in cooperation with our American allies, as we do with other allies. But as I made clear to some of our colleagues here, the command of the Canadian forces will be under the Canadian Chief of Defense Staff and those he designates, and so we're very clear on that. But again, as you know, and you've had a long record in this area, Ms. Gallant, of having a look at NATO and Canada's contributions and Canada's cooperation with other nations, we'll act consistently with how we have always operated in the past, and which is to making sure that what we are doing overall is a positive effect, that we are not one-off or renegades or off on our own. We want to make sure that you know, we compound the effectiveness of what we are doing by working with others.
Okay. Is there any anticipated role for our forces in handling detainees?
Again, that's not part of the mission that they are on, and again, they will any detainees will be continued to be under the Iraqi regime in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to now turn it over to Mr. Sagadish for 5 minutes, please.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président, et à mon tour.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would also like to thank the gentlemen for their presentations. Now, despite the fact that I find this to be a critical and complex situation, I think that there must also be a plan for dealing with the humanitarian aspects of this crisis. Minister Baird, during your visit last week, you saw that there have been mass displacements of people, and there have been hundreds of thousands of Iraqis displaced within their country, and these people need concrete measures as well. So I would like to know whether there are plans to deal with these defenseless people as part of our mission, and what are we doing currently to deal with that aspect of the situation in Iraq? What measures are in place or will be put in place to deal with this unfortunate situation in Iraq? And do you feel that the current humanitarian aid is sufficient to meet the needs of those people? And if we look at the cost of the military operation, will there be additional costs associated with the humanitarian situation, in addition to the amount that has already been mentioned? Thank you for your question. Of course, there are many people in Iraq who are defenseless. The first thing we need to do is to assist the Iraqi government and the forces in Kurdish Peshmerga to help them stop ISIS's advance, because we don't want to have an even greater humanitarian problem than we already have. There are barbaric practices there, and I hope that our assistance in Iraq will help turn the tide. As concerns aid, is it sufficient? Well, no, of course not. We were there and we saw the situation. We have made many announcements concerning the situation over the years. We already announced $28 million. That was Christian Paradis, the Minister for International Development, who announced that. I announced an additional $7 million in aid last week. And of course, we will also help the UN in its request for additional aid. We are looking at what we can do. I've been speaking with my colleague, the Minister for International Development, to discuss what else we can do. I saw the needs that exist when I was there, and our colleague made 4 requests for additional things that we can do, and we are ready to consider those things. It is very important not only for Canada, but also for other countries. We need to help incite those other countries to join us. In that way, we can go much further. So my answer is no, the aid is not sufficient, and we need to continue to provide aid on behalf of the Canadian public. So is this mission, this deployment, an advisory and assistance mission? That's what you've said. But as part of that assistance, will we be establishing refugee camps in the country? Will we be doing that immediately? Well, we will be following the UN and other organizations to help refugees. There are also organizations like the Red Cross and other Islamist organizations, development organizations, and we have a lot of strong partnerships with them. I think that there are already people on the field who do need our help, and we are considering how we can help them in their requests. A few days ago, we were there in the region to see what the needs were. We've already made several announcements, and we will continue to do our part.
L'aide humanitaire, l'aide sécuritaire pour les victimes.
So we need humanitarian aid for victims of sexual violence, for example. And of course, the security aspect is also very important.
Saganash, we're now going to complete this round with Mr. Anderson. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. I wanted to come back to an issue a couple of people have raised. Mr. Dewar mentioned the issue of religious persecution. There's a number of reports of religious minorities being viciously persecuted, and I think one of those occasions was on Mount Sinjar. And I'm just wondering if you can talk a bit about some of the specifics of that event, and then are there other specific events that the committee should be aware of in terms of what's happening on that front?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Anderson, I think some of the evidence that I've seen of the persecution is pretty graphic. I think many of us have seen some images, not simply on the web, but in meetings that I've had with different Christian groups, the Yazidi community. They've provided sort of indirect eyewitness accounts from their families that are present on the ground. Obviously, the situation around Mount Sinjar was quite acute. It was very, very focused. The same is the case around Mosul and Karakosh, just outside of Mosul, where the Christians were driven out by ISIL. For the first time in 2,000 years, there are no Christians present there. I think that the targeted persecution of both Christians, Yazidis, and Mandeans takes on a variety of different forms. As Mr. Dewar pointed out, the Yazidis and the Mandeans feel very anchored to a particular territory because it's incorporated in their faith. Christians feel the ability to move and to leave. And I want to flag again the importance of not only helping those Christians and other religious minorities that feel they need to leave the region to do so through the resettlement program that we already have in place, but also, and I think this is largely part of the focus of our work in the Office of Religious Freedom, is to ensure that those Christians and other communities that want to remain in the region are able to do so. And again, I think that plays to Mr. Dewar's point on the need to protect those communities. And when you speak to the religious leaders, various bishops and other leaders that I've spoken to, they want people to stay, but they also realize that some may need to leave. And so it's a very difficult situation. You can tell that they're very anguished about it. But although that there's sort of mass atrocities happening across the different religious communities, the response of those communities varies somewhat based on their own assessment of their need to remain in place. I think part of our work that we would like to undertake in the coming months or over the medium and long term would be to support in particular those Christians that have fled to countries of migration such as Jordan and Lebanon, so that they might have the requisite places they need to help them maintain their identity and hopefully remain in the region.
Okay, Minister, to you. Okay, I thought someone else maybe respond to that. I'm just wondering, DFAT-D, they provide funds to programming for this at all? You mentioned about some of the projects you may be looking at, but I'm just wondering. I think there's some money going into supporting the High Council of Religious Leaders in Iraq, and another one advocating for rights of religious minorities in Iran that we put money into. And I'm just wondering, can you talk about the work with that community and whether, what do you see the future there?
I can't speak to the specific examples you mentioned because it wasn't funding that came through our office. It might have come through another part of the department, but we can certainly get back to you on that, Mr. Anderson. The funding that we are envisaging, I would say there's sort of two tracks. We had recently a call for proposals through our Religious Freedom Fund that completed in August 4th. The call was from June until August 4th. That was a global call for proposals. We netted roughly 220 proposals for funding for projects around the world, but we had a specific focus on the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Africa. So we have received, I believe, 3 specific project proposals that would help persecuted religious minorities in the region. We still have to go through our regular internal process to assess those, but those are happening sort of in the immediate future within the next week or so. And then it's our intention to launch, under our terms and conditions for the Religious Freedom Fund, we can launch a DFAT-D initiative that focuses specifically on a particular theme or a particular region. And so that's been sort of the ultimate goal of my consultations that I've been undertaking with Kanewa, Aid to the Church in Need, and various other groups.
Thanks, David. That's all the time we have for this round. Before we start the next round, I did want to ask a question, probably a quick question that requires a longer answer, but can we talk a bit about Iran? I know that Iran's been a hugely destabilizing force in the area, in Syria as well as Iraq, and they're concerned with ISIL. And I guess my question is, from a security perspective, where do you see, or how do you see dealing with Iran as it relates here? Because that's obviously a very tricky question, and they have not had a great track record at all in this area.
Some would say the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I would not say that. Iran is the biggest sponsor of state, the biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. And just because it's not their brand of terrorism doesn't admonish them. They have played a very destabilizing, had a very destabilizing influence in just about every single country in that region. from Hezbollah in South Lebanon to Hamas in the Gaza Strip, to their interventions in Bahrain, the attempted suicide of the Saudi ambassador in a restaurant in Washington, to their intervention in Yemen, to their growing role in parts of Iraq. So, I mean, we take a very negative view to that. There have been media reports that of certain things, but I mean, I think the Kurds would probably share, maybe not my complete view, but would share my apprehension.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to start next round with Mr. Dewar. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just on a question I wanted to get to before, or actually just a statement, I hope the government reconsider our taking in Syrian refugees. We've been asked by UNHCR to take 10,005 for the next 2 years because it would alleviate, obviously, not deal with the whole refugee crisis, but we know in the north of Kurdistan, north of Iraq and Kurdistan, they took 300,000 Syrian refugees. So they're already dealing with that. And just something I would encourage, perhaps talking to your colleague, Mr. Alexander, about that, Mr. Baird. We were there on the ground. I was there on the ground before. And one of the things we do know is that the Peshmergas know how to fight. We don't have to teach them how to fight. They know the ground. Their motto is, the mountains are our only friends. So this is not Afghanistan. This is, a group of people who have command and control. They do need some other supplies, certainly. But I guess my question, and maybe to the Minister of Defense, is what are we going to teach the Peshmergas? And I've heard from you what we won't be doing. Now, that's very clear. We won't be doing this, we won't be doing that. But what is it we're actually going to be doing in light of the fact that we do have a group of people who are able to fight? And I finally note that, as the Prime Minister said himself in Wales, that this will not be something that is, ISIL will not be defeated just by the military. And so if there's something else you want to add, how else are we going to deal with that?
I do agree with you that Peshmerga forces are experienced. I think you correctly pointed out the mountains are their home. I think where they lack specific skills is in a more conventional type warfare where there's a clearly delineated front line. So I think that will be the focus. I do think this cannot be won militarily. It is essential that the government in Baghdad address the real problems that frankly have existed for more than a decade. They have, the outgoing Prime Minister has not led an inclusive government, either in terms of his cabinet or in terms of any program, and there is no doubt that that has exacerbated a bad situation. Let's have some hope that the message that you delivered, that I delivered, that Mr. Garneau delivered, that Canadian diplomats have delivered for some time is heard, and that the promise that they're making on a government of inclusion is actually borne out, not just frankly in the hours and days ahead, but in the weeks, months, and years. That'll be key to winning this battle. If you have any other.
Yeah. Again, I think you make a good point. It's not just a military exercise. This is one component of this. But you and your colleagues and the minister have been very clear that this is one component of what has to be done for there to be a success in this area. And you've touched upon assistance to refugees, humanitarian assistance, and again, it has to be all a part of this to make this work. That it's not just a military exercise.
But I just
promoting pluralism, though, is a key part of it, though. That's why our support of the World Center for Pluralism with the Aga Khan Foundation, the work that Ambassador Bennett does.
I appreciate that, but I'm just trying to get the heart of the military piece, which we have concerns about on this side, and that is, if we've got these battle-tested Peshmergas, we're telling all the things that we can't do. I'm still not clear exactly what we would be doing and the value of what we'd be providing when we already have people who they certainly know how to fight.
Again, as I indicated, that technical assistance and advice, I believe, will be invaluable. But the Chief of Defense asked for a few comments.
I'd just say, Mr. Dewar, you're absolutely right in recognizing that Peshmerga have no shortage of fighting spirit or courage. What they have not got is the luxury of a significant standing army. or a professional standing army. So what we've got the luxury of here in Canada is having developed that very thing, certainly battle-tested in ways in Afghanistan that's provided us a tremendous ability to advise and assist, and it is that very thing that the Peshmerga seek from Western allies now.
But with respect, if I may, we're not talking about fighting a conventional war, so a standing army is one thing. The Peshmerga know how to deal with they did push back IS, and I know that there was problems at the beginning. So again, I'm just trying to glean out here what we're offering that they don't have. I'm hearing that they need, and we heard it, they need arms. Fair enough, but are we now going to be supplying them with the arms and training them on that? Are we just going to be training along with our allies who are supplying the arms? The tactics, I mean, the tactics, I think they've got down pat. I think one of the lessons that the Americans learned in Iraq and in Afghanistan in some ways is that you're not fighting a conventional army, an enemy, and that, in fact, what the Peshmergas know is how to deal with these guys because it's not a typical war, it's an asymmetrical war.
Well, I'm going to respectfully push back on you. I mean, you, I think, correctly identified that they're experienced in the mountains, that is their home. When you're out on open terrain with a more conventional type battle, with a front line, with the type of equipment that they're going to need to use to work with in terms of engaging as well, with the air support that the Americans and others are providing. So I think they will need support. I can say not only has President Obama in the United States asked for our support in this type of area, the KRG and the Iraqi forces are welcoming that support.
Thank you very much. Ms. Brown, 5 minutes.
Very much, Mr. Chair. Minister Baird, back to you, if you don't mind. I know in June of this year, Iraq was added to our list of development country partners. And I know right now there's a $10 million fund that is being decided by our programming people on how we move forward, particularly working in communities where there are international or internally displaced people. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit, first of all, about what we're doing diplomatically in Iraq right now, and could you tell us how willing Iraq is to have our engagement on these kinds of projects?
I think we have stepped up our engagement with Iraq in a big way, frankly, over the past 2 years. We have a permanent presence on the ground in Baghdad with co-locating with the British, which has been helpful because we couldn't obviously afford early on. Our new ambassador, Sakamani, has visited the region, both Baghdad, Erbil, Basra, elsewhere, on a regular basis. So we've really stepped up our engagement in the last year, which is positive. We've taken an approach not just with the foreign affairs side of the department, as you pointed out, the development side being a priority, and also on the trade side. Obviously, people being able to work, being able to provide for themselves and their own family is our long-term vision. There are opportunities for Canadian companies to assist the economic growth of Iraq, and that is something important. So I think we've stepped up the engagement in a big way that we hadn't a number of years ago. The capacity in some parts of the country, until recent months, Erbil and the KRG region was a very safe and secure area. I did notice on our visit to Baghdad, it was demonstrably different than it was even 18 months before. We were not required to wear flat jackets and helmets outside of the green zone, which I had 18 months ago. So we want to obviously push our interests and our values. I think it's in our interests to see a secure, humanitarian, stable-wise Iraq where people aren't fleeing. I think in terms of our values, it comes back to pluralism. This is a great Canadian experience that I think we can help share with the world. Going back many years, this has been a real centerpiece in Canadian foreign policy. The leadership that the Prime Minister has given the Aga Khan in terms of the Centre for Pluralism is important. The Aga Khan is probably the most world-eminent leader of pluralism, And the fact that he has a special connection to Canada, the fact that he is Islamic himself, I think is not unhelpful. The work of the Office of Religious Freedom is inherently about promoting pluralism, where you have genuine freedom of religion, not just freedom to believe, but freedom to fully practice and live your religion. So many of the other freedoms take care of themselves. That's got to be our long-term. That's got to be the long-term vision that we've got to work with our allies on in Iraq. I mean, it just was horrific to hear stories how Christian families were ratted out to this barbaric terrorist organization by their own neighbors and people in their community where they lived for millennia. Just absolutely horrific. And even we talk about religious minorities, Christians, U.S. journalists. There have been hundreds and thousands of Muslims killed in this conflict by this cult. And I think in the medium and long term, pluralism has got to be a big part of the solution. And the government in Baghdad has been deficient on that. And I think the establishment of a new government last night, we hope holds great promise. But our diplomatic resources will be going obviously to engage and encourage and to monitor and assess that. And obviously, I'll do that. Others will do that. It's tremendously important.
Ambassador Bennett, do you see a role for Canada on a going forward basis to speak into the situation and help the new Iraqi government with some of our experience and our advice?
Thank you. I think, again, just to reinforce what the Minister said, pluralism is at the heart of advancing religious freedom. We advance religious freedom overseas not simply through sort of international covenants that speak to it as a fundamental right, but we advance it based on the Canadian experience of pluralism. And so because we enjoy religious freedom here in Canada and we cherish it, it's incumbent upon us to, I think, speak to those countries where there is such a crying need for reinforcement and defense of that principle. So, in all the countries that we've been focusing on over the last year and a half, part of our outreach is regular engagement with government officials, with different ministries of religious affairs, interior ministries, those that have a responsibility for religious matters in a given country. And so I certainly want to hope, not only through our programming, but through our advocacy efforts, that we can continue to engage in Iraq, but not just Iraq, also in other parts of the region, because it's a real puzzle of different countries coming together, and there are broader challenges. Iraq, the situation there is most acute. But I think we need to, as our office does, that we're not engaged in short-term humanitarian activities, but rather more medium and longer-term activities. So I think we need to continue to, again, reach out to governments and bring that Canadian model to bear when we're engaging on religious freedom.
Thank you. That completes all the rounds that we do have, but I know there's still some additional questions, and we'll go about 4 more questioners back and forth. I'm going to start with Mr. Harris, and then I'm going to move over to Mr. Bazan. We're going to do Mr. Garneau, and then we'll finish it up with one of the Conservatives. Okay, so we'll turn it over to Mr. Harris for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. So far, gentlemen, I mean, what I see is I want to focus on the military deployment. I know the others have covered the humanitarian side. So far, what I've gotten today is that you won't tell us when the troops will actually be there. You won't tell us how many specifically. You keep this vague, several dozen. You're very vague on the continuation after 30 days, and I think the general consensus seems to be that not a lot can be accomplished within 30 days. And you will not commit to a parliamentary debate or a vote. Now, the news media is already reporting that President Obama will make a speech to the American nation tomorrow, I believe it is, where he will be talking about a 3-year program. And I guess you have to understand why Canadians are a little concerned about what road we're going down here and where this is leading to us without any significant commitment from from this government as to where we could be taken. Now, you know, and I know that when the Prime Minister was seeking to be the Prime Minister, he committed to a position that Parliament should be responsible for the commitment of Canadian forces to foreign operations. So what I want to know is how does that approach that you're taking here, how does that square with the statements that were made by the Prime Minister seeking to be Prime Minister and by previous agreements with our previous leader, Jack Layton, and he to ask to even change the standing orders of the House of Commons to ensure that there was a vote by Parliament on these matters before they took place. How does that work?
Well, first of all, I thought I was very specific in terms of exactly who would be going over. These are our special operational forces.
How many?
I indicated to that, and again, you said where would they be located, and I indicated to you that they would be in northern Iraq. And as I've indicated on a couple of occasions, that they are there for technical assistance and advice. And again, I said there would be a few dozen Canadian Armed Forces that will be on the ground. You know, we won't give you the flight numbers, you know, the times, exactly when and where they're going for security reasons. That being said, though, as I indicated, they are going to be deployed very quickly. There's an urgency, we believe, to what's taking place, and I think that's obvious to everyone who has viewed this area. And again, that's exactly what we'll do. I mean, with respect to debates in the House of Commons, I mean, part of what we are doing is reaching out, was calling this meeting, for example, to bring all members together so that they would have an opportunity to discuss either the deployment of the Special Operations Forces or indeed any of the other issues as they relate to this part of the world. So that being said, we certainly welcome debate, and one of the great things in our parliamentary system, as you know, Mr. Harris, on a regular basis, opposition parties can debate and call for a vote on any subject that they want. And so certainly if you and your party want to have additional speeches and debates on this, you're certainly welcome to do that. And I believe the Liberals are moving forward with a motion in that regard. And so, again, I think we're moving forward, and I think this is the right thing to do, my colleague.
I did want to discuss this, too, because I think the Prime Minister has always been clear. And in the past, when we had our mission in Libya, when we had extensions on the missions, on the combat missions in Afghanistan, there was parliamentary debate and there were votes. This is not a combat mission. You know, when we provided support in Mali to the French government, now that we're providing some training assistance, you know, I think it's quite a different case. I think we've tried to demonstrate some pretty goodwill. We had both opposition parties go to Iraq, be able to assess for themselves the situations. You know, and obviously, reasonable people can come to prioritize different aspects of how Canada can be involved. We've had this committee called a week before Parliament returns, pulling everyone back from their constituency responsibilities. That was the government's suggestion. We weren't carried kicking and screaming here. Parliament will resume Monday. If you want to have a tape note debate next week, we'd be very keen to do that. You get the opposition every year get quite a number of opposition days. If you'd like to have a specific debate and a vote, we're all game. We're committed to continue to work offline as well, providing briefings and you know, listening. Your parties come forward with a number of very good ideas that I'm in agreement with all four of them in terms of what else we can do there. So we want to be very constructive in our engagement with the opposition parties, with the government members, and with Parliament.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris and Mr. Baird. We're going to move over to Mr. Bazan. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think all of us understand that if we want to protect the ethnic and religious minorities in Iraq, and if we want to be able to deliver humanitarian assistance where it's needed, we have to improve the security situation. And that's why it is so important that Canada plays a role in improving the security situation in Iraq and defeating the ISIL terrorists. And I think we're all very proud of our Canadian Armed Forces and the brave men and women who serve us in uniform, who are always willing to step in and take on these leadership roles. Now, Minister Nicholson, you mentioned there's already 4 members of the Canadian Armed Forces that are on an advanced team over there, as well as 75 people that have been involved in both the CC-130J as well as the CC-177 aircraft in delivering aid into Iraq. And I was wondering if you might be able to just elaborate a little bit more what those 4 individuals are doing and what the ongoing mission is in delivering of assistance in the area.
Again, I think you make a very good point. These cannot just be military operations. They have to be a complete effort, and it's not enough for a country to say, there should be no military involvement, but we want to be involved heavily with aid and distributing. I mean, this is not a place where that is obviously possible. What we have done, and I indicated to you in my opening remarks, is that we have been assistance to others transporting equipment to Iraq, and we have done that with allies of ours, and again, this is in full cooperation of our major allies, and again, I indicated that we moved approximately 500,000 pounds of equipment into Iraq. This is not Canadian equipment or Canadian supplies. These were on behalf of, in one case, Albania. And again, this is what we are doing, because one of the things that I said is these things have to be a coordinated effort. It's not just Canada alone. It's not the United States alone or Great Britain. I mean, it's a cooperative effort on everyone's behalf to make sure that we accomplish what we want to accomplish, which is to put an end to this terrorist group and its activities in Iraq. And so again, it's the kind of effort that you have seen in the past from Canada. We continuously reach out, and again, we don't do it all by ourselves. But again, I think you made a very good point by raising that we have already used our equipment and the members of our armed forces to help move equipment and supplies into Iraq at this time. And again, the lead group that we have there are part of the announcement that the Prime Minister has made in this area, and that will continue. But as I've made very clear, we will watch it very, very carefully, my colleague.
We welcome the American leadership, initially on the humanitarian side with the airdrops to assist the cities on the mountaintop. We're prepared to be supportive. Before we could even provide assistance in that regard, the job was done. It happened much quicker than anyone thought. We welcome the American leadership to provide support to the KRG and folks in Iraq so that they can win this battle themselves and protect these minorities, to stop this humanitarian crisis from growing. We welcome the American leadership to try to push this back so we could stop some of these barbaric things that are happening in Mosul, for example. And obviously, President Obama has requested Canada's support, and he and Prime Minister Harper work well together, and Canada is a reliable ally of the United States in pushing our values and our interests.
Thank you. General Lawson, just want to, we talk about that we're going to be deploying members from the Special Operations Forces. Can you just describe for committee exactly who the Special Operations Forces are, what their mandate is, and what training they'd be doing right now in getting ready for deployment?
Thank you. The Special Operations Forces are a step up, slightly higher trained members of the Army, some from the other environments, but largely the Army. They're extremely fit at higher readiness levels and with capabilities that all Western nations take to a slightly higher level in defense of very quick breaking threats, such as the one that they're be going to face and advise and assist in facing as we go ahead. So they're extremely well trained. They also come back from having been well involved in the mission in Afghanistan, which was at the end a train and advise mission as well.
Thank you very much.
We're going to move over to Mr. Garneau. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. I think that most Canadians who are following the the committee hearings this morning are trying to get that sense of what it is our Canadian troops are going to do over there. And I'm going to have a stab at it, and please tell me if I'm out in left field. But I'm imagining that group of Canadian Special Ops soldiers, whether it's 35 or 65, providing that advice in some sort of command center or operations center that's behind the lines, where they are working with the Kurdish Peshmerga, possibly the U.S., Americans, possibly some other allies in this coalition, and their job is to help to provide advice, whether it is for an offensive operation that is going to be carried out by the Iraqis, the Kurds, or even a defensive operation if ISIS decides it's going to make try to create an onslaught somewhere along the lines. Now, is that roughly what the picture is? And secondly, very quickly, it is President Obama that proposed to Canada or asked Canada to play a role. He spoke to the Prime Minister. Was that role proposed, or was it Canada, you decide what you're going to do, and this is what we decided we were going to do?
I think that was a pretty good description of what our armed forces will be doing in terms of giving advice, and I think that's well done. I mean, with respect to President Obama, the conversation, I'll turn it over to my colleague, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So what exactly was?
I mean, they wanted political support and tangible assistance to combat this menace and this barbaric threat. The issue with respect to training and advice was specific. Humanitarian as well was specific, and Canada can't just on global affairs sit back with a checkbook and just send money. They need Canada's tangible help. We obviously, they're not asking for, and we are not engaging in a combat mission, but I think the expertise and skill and leadership that the Canadian forces have, you as a former member would know that well, I think can make a positive contribution to halting the advance of this humanitarian catastrophe and to hopefully ending the barbarism that we're seeing from this terrorist group. I don't think this will be easy, but I think we need to help the Kurds and help the Iraqis help themselves, and that's exactly what we're proposing to do.
It's never a question on these that Canada goes in, acts on its own, and figures out on its own what it can or should be doing. I mean, we always work in cooperation, with our allies. But again, we're very clear that it's a Canadian mission under Canadian control. We will make the decisions, but it's very clear from the outset that we are prepared to cooperate, in this case with the United States and with our other allies, in what's taking place on the ground.
Thank you. A question for Minister Baird, because it's in Foreign Affairs. At the moment, of course, we have one office that's in the British Embassy in Baghdad, and the ambassador who is accredited to Iraq is based in Jordan. Given the fact that we have more exposure now in Iraq with all of the things that you've described, including this new involvement, is there any thought, because of the need to liaise with the government, particularly on the issue of inclusivity, to have a bigger presence in Baghdad, or is the plan still to be doing it from Jordan?
That's a good question. Obviously, this ambassador has probably increased his engagement tenfold over the previous one by having a charge in Baghdad. Co-located with the British. Obviously, that stepped up our engagement. I certainly I think we could see the need, whether it be a value, for example, in expanding that. So it's certainly something that I'm prepared to consider.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
Surprised in the last couple of hours, other than the one question that Mr. Allison asked, no one's asked the question about regional impact on neighboring countries. And I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about that, about Turkey, Syria, Jordan, and the impact that this is having and may have on them.
With respect to Turkey, obviously the porous nature of the border there is a challenge. Obviously, with respect to Syria, ISIS is a direct creation of President Assad's war against his own people. He created the fertile conditions for the establishment of this group, and bears significant responsibility. In Jordan, Jordan is always a very constructive player. They're obviously a key friend and ally of Canada. We have obviously done a significant amount, like in the hundreds of millions, on the humanitarian support over the years with respect to Assad's war against his own people. We put a lot of that support into Jordan to provide to support our friends who are on the front lines of dealing with this humanitarian crisis. And obviously we will continue to do that. We've made Jordan a country of focus with respect to development assistance, Minister Parody. There's no doubt, though, that Canada, the United States, the West can play an important role, but there is a role for the Islamic world. There is a role for the Arab world, and I was impressed with what came out of the Arab League the other day. Saudi Arabia has been incredibly generous on the humanitarian side, and we do need everyone to take the role that they're best suited to. The promotion of pluralism, again, is key, so it's important.
Okay, I think just one last question. That is, we're going to be going into sending personnel into northern Iraq, and I'm just wondering if you can lay out what Canada's position is with regards to the KRG. Do we have any concerns regarding the Peshmerga? And then what is Canada's position on recognizing Kurdistan as an independent state?
Well, that's not something we're looking at. We obviously want to see Iraq be safe, secure, be a pluralistic society, whether you're Shia, Sunni, Kurdish, Christian. We want to see it survive. Obviously, the Kurdistan regional government is a key partner for us, but obviously we have important responsibilities to continue to have a good and constructive working relationship with the central government in Baghdad, and I think we tried to reach out and do that to strengthen that. This past week, I visited 18 months ago. We've got to have great hope that this new government can take a different course than the previous one. Certainly, it is tremendously important for all of us, whether it's members of the Gulf Cooperation Council, members of the Arab League, members of the Organization for Islamic Cooperation, but for the West as well to preach the value of inclusion. And I thought it was particularly powerful when we met with the President of Iraq, and you had members of 3 political parties with one message: inclusion, inclusion, inclusion. So we will obviously work to monitor and encourage that in the new government.
Thank you. To our witnesses, I want to thank you all for making yourself available in such short notice for this very important topic, and to my colleagues around the room, thank you as well for rearranging your schedules to be here today. With that, the meeting is adjourned. Thanks.